morning, everyone. It's March 11th, Thursday, 2021. We were just commenting what happened to the winter. It's gone. It's lovely. For the record, we do have a quorum, but members, we are going to be laying Senate File 1089 on the table. But I'm excited to hear this bill from Senator Marty. I know he's put a lot of work into this bill. It is the creation of a conversation that I had with the commissioner about FEMA reimbursement, and there's an A2 amendment that Senator Marty is going to move, and we're going to adopt. But this deals with our local counties and cities and their method for the FEMA reimbursement, which we have to really to have a good conversation about. MMB here is to testify, and of course we have Mr. Nauman and Mr. Bodern too. So with that, Senator Marty to Senate File 1089.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as you indicated, Senate File 1089 came from, I think, your sense of the state is trying to collect everything it can to maximize federal reimbursement to deal with COVID. And as the state and MMB are doing, it'd be appropriate to try and help local governments access some of this money as well. And it's, as you who initially introduced the bill and we discussed it and I took it over, it's one that we hope will generate some significant money. We don't know what the impact will be. And the A2 amendment should help with that. I will move that amendment and explain real briefly, though I suppose this would be an author's amendment being the first hearing. But basically, it does several things. It's saying that any local governments that receive funding, and this is the funding that came in that 841 million CARES relief that the cities and counties were able to use, that any government that received that funding from the state can apply for FEMA reimbursement for FEMA eligible expenses, which are a small subset of the overall expenses that are the CARES Act eligible. And if they apply, they notify MMB. And if they get the reimbursement, they get to keep half of it for their own, only if they have other COVID related expenses that can be used for, and the other half would go back to the state for the state to dish out under the CARES Act. And if local government receives it after November 1st, we were going to have them send it all to the state just because the money has to be used by the end of the year under the CARES Act, under the federal law. So we have to make sure that the money gets spent that way. The challenges for this are, one, the FEMA reimbursement is not a simple process. We've heard that clearly from not just the state folks, but also the local people. And on top of that, we have, with the new funding coming in this week, it's given the resources and the capacity of local governments on huge chunks of money coming in that have to be spent very quickly. It's kind of like if you have $1 million, you got to spend very quickly. Well, you know, we could get another $50,000 if we go through these extra steps, and it may not always work out. And I think the local governments were clear; they're doing everything they can. And I think the trouble is they've got their hands full right now, and they're going to try and do what they can. And certainly, smaller local governments are unlikely to do it, and some of the bigger units have more of the funds. They have so many things going on, and so few of these may qualify. So we don't know the results, but I'd like to move the A2 amendment and then have Amy Jorgensen speak from MMB.
Thank you, Senator Marty, for that very good description. I'm sure there might be some questions with that motion on the A2 amendment. Video on, please. Unmute. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion prevails, and it is an author's amendment, Senator Marty, so my apologies, probably didn't need to go through that. But anyway, members, we do have letters of support in your packets too. You may want to take a look at that. Anything further, Senator Marty, on the A2 amendment?
Madam Chair, no, I turn it over to Amy Jorgensen at MMB for comments on the bill.
Super. Good morning, Ms. Jorgensen. Welcome to the committee.
Good morning, Senator Rosen, members of the committee. Thanks for having me here. I'm Amy Jorgensen, the Director of the COVID-19 Response Accountability Office at MMB. I just want to say, starting out, how much we appreciated the partnership with the local governments. We worked with over 1,600 units of local government to distribute about $838 million of coronavirus relief funding in this past year. And we had a really good time working with them and helping them understand how to use those funds. So when we initially let out that money, I'm going to talk a little bit about how many things have changed since we did that. But when we initially let out that money, July of last year, what we instructed was that local governments could use the coronavirus relief fund money, the CRF, for the 25% match, which was in effect at the time. So they could use that 25% match for any FEMA reimbursements that they were planning on doing. A lot has changed since then. The local governments had until November 15th or December 1st, depending on what kind of government they were, to spend the money. And since then, the Coronavirus Relief Fund has been extended for another year to December 31st, 2021. And then also FEMA has come back and told us that they are planning on reimbursing 100% rather than 75% of eligible expenses. And so this bill is really an opportunity to try to help clarify the intended, when the local governments get money back, it's intended to help clarify how that money can be spent. And so again, as Senator Marty said, the bill would allow the local governments to retain 50% of any FEMA reimbursement they received for expenses that were originally paid for with the Coronavirus Relief Fund, and then return half to the state to help leverage those funds and to bring back the dollars. As you know, we've had conversations about this, Senator Rosen. The state has already applied for over $100 million in FEMA reimbursement, which we're really happy and excited about to be able to do, to be able to replenish some of those early expenditures for COVID out of the general fund and other funding sources. And so this bill is just an opportunity for the local governments to be able to participate in that, kind of unique opportunity as well, to bring back funds to the state, as well as to be able to spend coronavirus relief funds, kind of in a second tranche, and also to have a little bit more time to spend them, because originally, like I said, they could only spend the funds through the latter part of last year. Now they have more time because the Coronavirus Relief Fund was extended. And so we're excited to partner again with the local governments. I've talked with public safety. They are at the ready to do education outreach if they need to with the local governments, and we're certainly willing to help them out as well with whatever they need. So with that, that's the conclusion of my remarks. I'll stay on for questions if there are any.
Thank you, Ms. Jorgensen. Yeah, I do have a couple questions before members start raising their hands. I know we've never gone through anything like this before. How is the response with the local governments? Have they been very eager, and are they asking questions, and are they reaching out for you for this education outlook or outreach that you mentioned?
Senator Rosen, not so far. We haven't really heard a lot. We have already actually received a little bit of FEMA money back from a few counties that have, that have done the FEMA reimbursement. It's in a larger amount than what the bill would call for. So if this bill were to pass, we'd have to do some refunding, but not a lot. I mean, I do believe, as Senator Marty said, the local governments are really starting to focus now on the new money that's likely going to be coming now after the president signs the new bill. Lots of money that's going to be going. But I do think that there is a willingness out there, especially for some of the larger local units of government, to do this. And again, we would be happy to walk them through any questions that they have.
Thank you. Senator Johnson.
Thank you, ma'am. What again is the process, ma'am? Is it this microphone or a computer microphone?
I think it's this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Just a quick question on subsection 5. I'm not really familiar with the action order. Is that the same as the executive order?
Senator Marty or Mr. Nauman?
Madam Chair, I can take a shot at this, and Ms. Jorgensen can jump in if needed. Because the local government funds, the large portion of the local government funds, this would be excluding Hennepin and Ramsey counties that got their coronavirus relief funds directly from U.S. Treasury. All other local governments in Minnesota got their distributions from the Coronavirus Relief Fund through Minnesota Management and Budget and the Legislative Advisory Commission approval process. Whenever there's a Legislative Advisory Commission proposed expenditure, a period of time passes, the LAC can review and look at those expenditures. And then in the end, after the appropriate time period has passed, the Commissioner of Management and Budget executes an action order to actually spend the money. And so because there were some limitations on the action order, and because those local governments received the distribution through that action order, this application, this subdivision limits its provision or application to this bill to only those local governments that received distribution as a consequence of that action order. As a result, what that does is affect all, this bill would apply to only those cities, counties, towns that received the distribution through that action order, and would, as a consequence, exclude Hennepin and Ramsey County from the bill's effect.
They received, Senator Johnson, they received a portion from the feds directly, and then they also received, they were part of the queue of all the other cities and counties in the rest of the 841 million appropriation. Any further questions, Senator Johnson?
Yeah, Madam Chair, so that action order number 14, that was the bulk of the money that went through, for our counties and cities and different organizations, went through that action order 14 then. So most all of our jurisdictions will be eligible for this
Yes.
money. Okay.
Yes.
And that does include the cities then, Ramsey and Hennepin, or
Who would like to answer
Minneapolis
that,
and St.
Mr.
Paul.
Nauman or Senator
Madam,
Marty?
Madam Chair, I'll just try a quick, clear answer. If you're a local government in Minnesota that received CRF money, only Hennepin and Ramsey received it directly from the U.S. Treasury. All other local governments in Minnesota received it through this particular action order. So therefore, this bill only applies to that $841 million that was distributed through that action order. That's the effect of this subdivision.
So, Senator Johnson, further questions?
I think I'm okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm trying to get my arms around this. $841 million was sent out from the state of Minnesota to the local units of government. Of that 841, did that include the Hennepin Ramsey County, or was that a separate? I understand it was separate from the feds, but did they receive any of the 841 other million?
Yes, Senator Ingebrigtsen as the chief author of that. So Hennepin Ramsey received 150 million, correct? Directly from the feds. And then Hennepin and Ramsey were also in the 841 million pot that was evenly distributed by population.
Okay.
So, and so,
Senator Rosen.
Madam Chair?
yes, Ms. Jorgensen.
I just want to clarify, Madam Chair. So the amount of money that went to Hennepin and Ramsey County was 317 million.
Oh, 317.
And that was actually separate. That was actually separate from the 841. And so Hennepin and Ramsey, because they were a locality of over 200,000 population, they received 317 million from the federal government. The 841 million was what was distributed among everybody else. And so the 317 was not part of the 841. It was actually separate.
Ms. Jorgensen, wasn't the population 500,000 to qualify for
Yes.
317? Right. So we
Yeah,
were,
Madam Chair, I apologize. Yes, 500,000.
well, and I apologize. I thought it was 150. It was 317, went directly to Hennepin and Ramsey. And then also they were part of the 841. Senator
So
Ingebrigtsen.
question, so how much did Hennepin and Ramsey receive out of the 841?
Madam Chair,
Ms. Jorgensen.
that would be none. So the counties themselves did not receive anything out of the 841, but the cities within Hennepin and Ramsey did receive that funding.
I should have pulled up my bill. That's right.
So, okay, so all the cities in Hennepin and Ramsey received, no, they had to be over a certain population. So that would leave Minneapolis and St. Paul that received out of the 840.
Minneapolis and St. Paul were part of the 841, correct.
How much
But
of that?
Hennepin and Ramsey were not. They received it directly, but I don't know, but maybe Ms. Jorgensen knows if that was shared, the 317 was shared with their cities. I don't know. Correct? There was, Ms. Jorgensen, there was no teeth to say that they had to share it with their cities within the county. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, that's correct. And I am not aware of how Hennepin and Ramsey distributed that funding. I believe that because Minneapolis and St. Paul were already getting a fairly large pot of money from the 841, I don't believe that there was a lot of sharing going on, but we would have to talk with people from Hennepin and Ramsey to know for sure. And just to clarify, Madam Chair and Senator Engelbrechtson, not just Minneapolis and St. Paul, but all cities of a certain size, I think of a population over 200 within Hennepin and Ramsey would have received funding from the 841.
Thank you.
So Senator Marty, what is the purpose of subdivision 5 then?
The subdivision 5 is to make it clear that we only have authority over the money that came through us. The money that the feds cut to others, that's their money and so on. I don't know if they are seeking FEMA reimbursement for it. If there's significant amounts, they should, but I think that's their money. It was set aside for them. I talked with them because, again, like if city of Maplewood or some other community in those cities, in those counties was seeking funds for this, they want to make sure that they're doing it right because somehow they often end up, they have some of the expertise that some of the cities don't have. I think this is more of the money that's likely to happen here. It's more likely the counties will be able to apply for this additional FEMA reimbursement. And again, this is a small subset of the CARES funding. CARES covered a lot more things. This FEMA reimbursement only covers some portion of it. And if they get this money, it has to be spent on things that are CARES fund eligible. In other words, they can't use it for general budget. It's for their COVID relief efforts. And the thing that may undercut how much this does is the fact that they are now getting, as of this week, they'll be getting more money from the federal government. And again, if you've talked to local government officials, how hard they had to work quickly to get the money out on time before it expires, they have to hustle with that. And then again, it's on the scope of for every $1 million you get, you might have, I don't know, you might have 25,000 you could get from this reimbursed, and that would expand the $1 million you had for addressing COVID things. But this is going to be a small portion of it. And if you look at, I think the county's letter, they talk about how labor intensive it is with no guarantees of getting it back. So again, I don't know how widely it's going to be used, but the same thing, the state MMB has been trying to maximize the dollars. Anytime they have a chance that they think is realistic, they're going to apply. And we want to, and I think the cities and counties are likely to do the same. We want to give them the opportunity for that.
Wouldn't we want the Hennepin and Ramsey to also do that, Senator Marty? Because we are missing out of some state funds also, if they don't.
Madam Chair, I think they are going to do the same as all the other local governments. I think they will apply for it. The question is whether that was a deal the federal government made with those two counties. And my presumption is that we can't deal with that the federal, I don't know. My understanding is that the feds cut the deal with them in effect, and we don't have any say over it.
So if they do apply for FEMA reimbursement, it goes directly back to them? Or?
Yes, and they can, if they have less COVID CARES relief expenses than they've already got covered, it makes no sense then because they can't use it. But I think my understanding of it is, and they may have a separate thing if they want to speak to this, but that we don't have any control over that, and that they will be applying, assuming they feel there's some expenses that they can get out of it. I think every what I've heard from the local governments is if there's some money we can get for it, almost all of them have more expenses that maybe CARES eligible than they have money for it. So I expect everybody who has a chance at it's going to apply. But again, it's very labor intensive, and there's a lot of these governments are swamped right now. So I don't think they're going to be. It's not like we're Santa Claus and we're promising lots of new money, because I think they realize the difficulty of getting it.
Mr. Jorgensen, what can I ask? Put you on the spot here on that provision, subdivision 5. How you feel about that?
Sure. So, Madam Chair, specifically, the question is the kind of division between Hennepin and Ramsey and the state funding.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, so again, Hennepin and Ramsey would have been considered prime recipients of the federal government, just as the state of Minnesota was considered a prime recipient. So that relationship then becomes a little bit different. None of the money from Hennepin and Ramsey ever passed through the state's coffers. You know, it went directly from the federal government to Hennepin and Ramsey. So I don't believe that we would have any jurisdiction over that money to be able to try to claw that back from Hennepin and Ramsey. Any excess funds that they have would have to go directly back to the federal government, to the Treasury.
Thank you. Senator Ingebrigtsen.
So just a very simple question, the money that other cities and counties are sending back, that once they apply, they get the money and they find out that there's money back, so that comes back to the state. You're saying Minneapolis and St. Paul do not have to do that?
Senator Marty.
Madam Chair, Senator Ingebrigtsen, no, that's money that is kind of like if Wisconsin gets money, can we claw the money back? It's not our money. It was never given to us. We have no control over that. That was federal government directly to them. What we're doing with this is saying the same thing the state is trying to do, trying to maximize FEMA dollars. Let's let the local governments try and do it too. We could do any percentage we want. We could do 50%. They keep themselves. You could do 100%. They keep themselves. We have to, that's what we would be doing here, is saying, what percentage do we think they should be able to do? And some of these local governments are going to be doing it. Again, prior to this legislation, local governments could, in some cases, have done this just for the good of the state. They wouldn't get anything out of it. The reason they may not is because it's a huge administrative expense for something that's not a guarantee. And but bottom line is, it's all going into CARES relief expenses. You cannot spend it for anything other than something that's eligible for CARES. Otherwise, you're in effect using the FEMA reimbursement. You'd be double dipping if you weren't using it for CARES things, for additional CARES expenses.
Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Madam Chair, I think I'm clear. Very simply, if $841 went out, that would, Hennepin and Ramsey didn't get part of that. They've got a separate 317 from the federal government.
But there's cities within Hennepin.
But the cities got of the money from the 841, and now they're not going to have to pay that back because of the large cities they are. Is that correct?
Large counties.
Large counties.
Mm-hmm. And there was no requirement for Hennepin and Ramsey to share with their cities. So I am concerned that the state is going to be missing out on some money from the reimbursement of Hennepin and Ramsey. We aren't going to know what reimbursement has been applied for and what it's been used for, where we will know from the other jurisdictions. MMB will know. Is that correct, Ms. Jorgensen?
Madam Chair, yes, that is correct. And actually, we do have insight into all the counties and cities, we have access to the FEMA portal, which is a federal portal. So we do have sight into what Hennepin and Ramsey would have applied for. So we do have that information.
Senator Kiffmeyer, and then Senator Kent is next. I'm sorry, Senator, you're good. Okay. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm noticing here, and we've asked a lot of questions, and information is important. But as I look through this delete all amendment, though, I'm noting that on the second page, line 2.3, it's talking about reporting, and that the local unit of government must report to the Commissioner of Management and Budget in a form and manner. Frequently, Madam Chair, when we have situations like this, there is the requirement to also report to the chair of the committee and the ranking minority member. And I think there's very common language that I think we could add on to this so that we get this information directly as well. Now, it looks like these are going to be counties reporting to MMB, but MMB could then consolidate them, or we could just say any report they send to MMB also send to the chair and ranking member of the Finance Committee.
Senator Marty?
Madam Chair, if you're going to do that, I would encourage you to have them just report to MMB and have MMB pass it on. Otherwise, you've got every local government being told they got to learn who to email all these things to, the reports to. They do have to report to MMB. I think it would be simpler to just have MMB pass that on to the appropriate chairs and leads.
Ms. Jorgensen, is there a requirement as such for any FEMA reimbursement? Is that already common practice?
Madam Chair, yes. So we've instructed, and again, we have insight into, who is applying through that FEMA portal. So either proactively or reactively, we will know who has been applying. And yes, we will ask them to report to us if they do receive FEMA reimbursement and if they're going to reuse those funds. So that is a common requirement and something we could easily pass along to you.
Senator Kiffmeyer?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I understand that MMB is getting the information, and part of this bill is to do that. I want the legislature to also get that information. So if staff can help me draft an amendment that does that in the appropriate language with Senator Marty's okay. But again, we have a reporting here to MMB. I understand that. But MMB could further those or combine them, whatever it is. I'd like to have that information come to the chair of the Finance Committee and the ranking member.
Senator Marty?
Madam Chair, as long as it's done through MMB rather than have all the local governments have to
Yes.
learn who all to send it to. Because they're, under this, they'd be required to send it to MMB, and then MMB would just consolidate it and send it all to us.
Madam Chair, that is
Senator Kiffmeyer?
acceptable.
Thank you. And it looks like Mr. Bodern will have an oral amendment. Mr. Bodern?
So Madam Chair and members, thinking through this, I think I can supply something that might meet Senator Kiffmeyer's intentions. The language would go on page 2, line 5 after the period, and would say that the commissioner shall provide a copy of the reporting required under this subdivision to the chair and ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee and the chair and ranking member of the House Ways and Means Committee.
Senator Kiffmeyer?
I think that doesn't, Madam Chair. It's an oral amendment, so it's a little more challenging, but I think it's a good start, and it may be what's needed, but I think for now that would do it.
Senator Marty?
Madam Chair, it's fine with me.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bodern, could you please say that again for us?
Sure thing. So Madam Chair, on page 2, line 5 of the A2 amendment after the period, insert, the commissioner shall provide a copy of the reporting required under this subdivision to the chair and ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee and the chair and ranking member of the House Ways and Means Committee.
Okay.
Madam Chair, is there any time, I've noticed in other places here, there has been a time within 14 days or something like that, or a date? I think that would be a good addition.
Mr. Bodern?
Reasonable, of course.
Chair, the only thinking I'd have here, and I'd certainly defer to any guidance from Ms. Jorgensen or Mr. Nauman, the issue might be that this is on a continuing basis. And the question is really whether, if you require it that way, I think the reporting becomes pretty problematic. It's kind of a flood of documents. The way it's written here would leave the commissioner some discretion in how to bundle this information. Pretty clearly, there would be a requirement. So, I mean, I'd leave it to you. You could do it every 14 days or something like that. It's something to consider.
And Mr. Nauman?
So Madam Chair, I think Mr. Bodern has the issue identified, but I will offer that if the intent is a complete list of all the expenditures, it would need to probably be after December 30th of this year, which is the concluding period in which the spending can occur under federal law. So typically we've done something like backing it into maybe January 15th or January 30th of 2022. That would be a final list. If Senator Kiffmeyer's intention is to have a rolling reporting, then it would need to be, that would be more reporting for the agency on an ongoing basis. I think that's the decision point.
Senator Kiffmeyer?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. And I will yield to your deference as Madam Chair, as Chair of Finance Committee, is an end-of-year cumulative report sufficient for this rather than a rolling ongoing? what would be most useful to oversight of the legislature?
Ms. Jorgensen, do you have any thoughts?
Thank you, Madam Oops. Yeah, Madam Chair and Senator Kiffmeyer. No, I think
Ms. Jorgensen, you went mute on us. Ms. Jorgensen?
Madam Chair, she's still on, we're still getting the closed captioning. We can't hear her.
Okay.
I'm wondering if the folks on Zoom can hear her.
I think that would keep you informed, all going along here, but
Ms.
then
Jorgensen?
also give you that final report. Yep.
Ms. Jorgensen, we missed like
Yes.
half all of your comments.
Oh, no.
Something happened, you froze
Okay.
up. So it's
All right. Sorry about that.
you.
So hopefully it won't happen again. So Madam Chair and Senator Kiffmeyer, what I was actually thinking as you were having the conversation is that maybe what we could do is provide a quarterly update report and then a final report in January with all of the expenditures.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Yeah, I think that works, Madam Chair, don't you? Yes.
Senator Marty?
It's fine, Madam Chair.
Great, okay. On that, Mr. Bodern, could you say that one more time then and add that oral, the other oral amendment?
So Madam Chair, and I'll admit, I'm still thinking about exactly how to word the timing portion of it. I'll take a stab at it here. So once again, it's on page 2, line 5 of the A2 amendment after the period. Insert, the commissioner shall provide a copy of the reporting required under this subdivision to the chair and ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee and the chair and ranking member of the House Ways and Means Committee. And then I think you can add another sentence that would say, the reports required under this subdivision shall be submitted each quarter and include a final report due no later than, and I'm not sure I caught the date that Mr. Nauman suggested.
Madam Chair, I was
Mr. Nauman.
thinking January 15th, if Ms. Jorgensen thinks that's sufficient time, or backing it down to the 30th of January if a little bit more time is required.
Why don't we just-
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Jorgensen.
I think January, Madam Chair, January 30th probably would be the best date, just to make sure we have enough time to get everything in and compiled and that the local governments have time to get that information to us.
Senator Kiffmeyer?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I yield to Ms. Jorgensen on the time, and I think whatever date she has said would be acceptable for my purposes, I think, for our purposes.
Further comments on the oral amendment? Senator Franzen, you have your hand up. Any comments on this? Are you good? Okay. Senator Champion, you good? Till later? Okay.
I'm
Okay.
good on this amendment. I just got another question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Kiffmeyer's oral amendment on page 2, line 5. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Okay, Senator Champion is next.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to clarify a couple things. It's my understanding that the money, I guess I'm going back to your bill, Madam Chair. It's my understanding that the cities in Hennepin and Ramsey were a part of your bill, and it's my understanding that those cities in Hennepin would be subject to this bill because that money came through the city. So I want to just make sure that Ms. Jorgensen corrects me there. And the second question I have is my understanding that Hennepin and Ramsey and the other cities counties, I should say, who got a direct appropriation from the feds would be audited by the feds, and they would be responsible to the federal government if proceeds were spent inappropriately. And I just want to make sure that I'm clear about that. And lastly, I would just want to confirm that MMB has the ability to look to see if cities and counties are applying for FEMA funds, and so that ability to see that and understand what's happening in that space. So those are my 3 questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Champion. Ms. Jorgensen, I hope you understood
Madam
that.
Chair, yeah, I think so. Madam Chair, Senator Champion. So yes, cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, or any city within Hennepin and Ramsey, is definitely included. And so they would be part of our scope for doing the FEMA reimbursement. To your second question, Hennepin and Ramsey, yes, they would have to go through a single audit of the coronavirus relief funds. Any misuse, anything like that would have to be returned. And then the third question, I believe, was, do we have insight or can we see what's happening? And so, yes, we definitely have insight to any city, county, town that's applying for FEMA reimbursement. And we will be following up with all of those local governments to make sure that if the funding originally came from the coronavirus relief fund, that they understand what the rules are and that they need to return half the funds.
And
Senator
Madam
Champion,
Chair-
we are having a hard time hearing you,
Oh,
Senator
really?
Champion. So,
I'd like to be heard, Madam Chair. I don't know.
you're not as loud as you usually are. Don't mean it that way, but
I know what you mean, Madam Chair. Last thing that I'll say, and I'll try to talk louder. And I think what is really important, Madam Chair, about the last thing that Ms. Jorgensen said about the audit is because, in my understanding, even when we debated your bill, Madam Chair, one of the reasons why we needed to know exactly what was happening with the funds that were distributed through your bill is because some concern was what would happen and who would be responsible if those cities that received money through your bill did not appropriately spend those monies. And if we got audited, who would be responsible? Would it be that city or would it be the state because the money came to the state and was distributed by us to those others? And so Ms. Jorgensen can correct me if I'm wrong there, but that's what I remember as really being important when we discussed your bill, Madam Chair.
thank you, Senator Champion. You know, I probably should have had Mr. Nauman go through that, the bill, the CARES Act, before we even started this discussion. Because there seems to be a little confusion. And so, Mr. Nauman, can you go through those numbers and who was eligible, the timing, please?
So,
Madam Chair, if I could just quick comment.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
To the point that Senator Champion made about who is responsible for the audits. Maybe Mr. Nauman can just cover that as well. I think the spending entity, it's auditing of the spending that is the issue, not the fact that it came through in a grant, but it's on the spending. I just thought I wanted to say that now while it was on the subject. Thank you, Mr.
Senator
Nauman.
Kiffmeyer.
Sorry.
Madam Chair, Senator
Mr. Nauman
Marty.
and Senator Franzen, we'll get to you after we have this little briefing. Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, Senator Kiffmeyer, I think what I will do with respect to the audits is leave that to Ms. Jorgensen. I think she's closer to that aspect of this than I would be about the auditing process. I think that's right in her wheelhouse. What I can offer Senator Rosen on your question is maybe a little bit of foundation. Minnesota received an initial allocation of about $2.186 billion from the CARES Act associated only with what's called the Coronavirus Relief Fund. That money was allocated to the state, and then the language of the federal law required, based on the size of Hennepin County and Ramsey County, a subset of that was distributed directly to those counties. This was an allocation process that the federal government employed, making it easier to get the dollars quickly out the door. They chose the large jurisdictions to receive money directly. So Hennepin and Ramsey in Minnesota received that direct distribution. That left about $1.869 billion to the state of Minnesota. And as part of Senator Rosen's bill, a debate ensued about what amount should be distributed to the cities, counties, and towns in Minnesota that were not directly distributed. And bills were passed, debates ensued throughout the spring, and ultimately the executive branch provided a legislative advisory commission allocation in an amount that was very close to the final, what seemed to be the final agreement between the House and Senate, roughly mirroring what Senator Rosen's bill had in its final form. And that was distributed through Legislative Advisory Commission Action Order number 14, and that value was $841 million. Members, we do have a spreadsheet that lists all the CRF distributions, and Ms. Jorgensen's office has also provided a collection of regular reports on the spending associated with the CRF, and this is one of those items. Senator Rosen, I'll pause there and see whether or not I'm on point to what you were hoping for.
Yes, Mr. Nauman, thank you. Was my question was, Hennepin and Ramsey, were they eligible for the 841?
So, Madam Chair, they were not included in the distribution in the final bill that you had authored. They were not included in the Legislative Advisory Commission action order. Some of the confusion results from the fact that during the legislative process, there was a lot of conversation about whether cities and towns in Hennepin and Ramsey County should receive their dollars from Hennepin and Ramsey County distribution, or whether they should come from the state. In the end, that money was provided to Hennepin and Ramsey County cities and towns through that 841 distribution directly from the state and not from Hennepin and Ramsey counties. But that was admittedly, confusion may continue to exist because that was a very viable conversation that was happening during the legislative process.
Okay. Thank you. And because subdivision 5, Senator Marty, is that the Hennepin and Ramsey received their money directly from the feds, you are not requiring them to adhere to this A2 amendment. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, I don't know that we have the authority to do that. And also, when you read the letters from the local governments, and what I've been hearing from them is a lot of them is kind of, well, we'd love to try and apply for this if we can, given the amount of difficulty of doing it and the relatively small amounts that are available for it. I think a lot of them won't be able to apply for it just because of that. So I don't know how much, again, I'm hoping that this can be millions of dollars that local governments in the state can get back to cover these COVID expenses. I'm not sure how much of that's actually going to happen. Yes.
So, and I hate to beat this dead horse, Senator Marty, but if Hennepin and Ramsey do apply for FEMA, they get the full reimbursement 100% back, will we know as a state what was asked for reimbursement and how much, and what was reimbursed?
Madam Chair, I believe we will, because FEMA, it's all public and MMB gets all that data.
I see. Thank you. Senator Franzen, thank you for being patient.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for allowing me the time to kind of jump into this discussion. There's a few of us that do represent Hennepin and Ramsey. I'll talk about Hennepin because it represents some of the cities that I cover: Eden Prairie, Minnetonka, Edina, and Bloomington. And I just want to react to the concern that's been stated by several folks in the committee about the state missing out on some of that reimbursement with this bill. And the way I remember and the way I believe it's the intent of the CARES Act was that the money was appropriated to these larger counties across the country, not just Minnesota. So it happened to be that Hennepin and Ramsey qualified under that distinction in that CARES Act. And on top of that, the money never came through the state. It came directly from the federal government to those counties for the purposes described in the CARES Act. So we don't have that authority to jump in and grab reimbursements if they do ask for reimbursements from FEMA. And I think it would be helpful if the committee, maybe this might make it longer, but FEMA reimbursement is also very prescriptive. The CARES Act is very prescriptive itself, but the FEMA reimbursement for purposes of this bill, excuse me, is also very prescriptive and only covers certain things. And I'm just going to list a few of them that I've been confirmed that that would qualify would be some certain PPE, certain costs of emergency shelter, and certain levels of emergency medical care. Let's remind viewers and committee members that counties like Hennepin, for instance, have HCMC in our security hospital that might have capabilities that other jurisdictions do not. So they are incurring expenses for our state above and beyond other smaller counties potentially and less smaller and local levels of government. I remember vividly having a discussion whether some townships should have an allocation sent directly to them if they may not even need it or use it because of the nature of how large or small they are. So this is very nuanced. I just want to put it out there that there was a rhyme and reason why the money went directly to these larger counties because they need that direct information. They serve a certain need for our state. And in the case of HCMC, I think we could all point to any of our constituents who have used this particular hospital, including my father-in-law, who's saved his life a long time ago, who lives in Hutchinson. So it's the only place that has a hyperbaric chamber in our state. So it has a value, and I just want to vouch for my county that is doing a great job, and like any other county around the state, has done above and beyond work with this fund to be able to support COVID response. But that the auditing piece is important too, and we know that the federal government's going to audit them, just like we audit our cities and local governments. And if the money is used inappropriately, which sometimes it has been, that would be something that would be reimbursed to the state, or in this case, to the federal government, this bill with FEMA reimbursement. So I just wanted to mention that, and hopefully that eliminates any concern about these two counties having direct appropriations from the federal government. It's not the first, it will be the last time, but it will be used wisely. And we've been having direct communications with our counties on how they're using these funds to support housing, for PPE, to support our hospitals and other essential services. So I know that they're doing being very judicious, and frankly, they could use the reimbursement to continue to support our community during this pandemic. So thank you, Madam Chair, for the time.
Thank you, Senator Franzen. Before I go to Senator Kiffmeyer, Senator Marty, I know you have a letter of recommendation from the Association of Minnesota Counties. Was that written before or after the delete all?
Madam Chair, I think that was written, I saw the letter last night or this morning. I think it was last night they sent it. So no, I think they had seen the A1, which was only a technical change between A1 and 2. So they have seen the letter when they wrote their letter. They saw the amendment, I should say, before they wrote their letter.
They did see the amendment, and so they know that there is, I just, as a matter of fairness, I was just wondering. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for Mr. Nauman or Mr. Bodden. Not quite sure exactly which way to go. But this question is to clarify, Mr. Nauman, because the question of audits came up, and then also with it, I would suspect, who pays for those audits. And Mr. Nauman, I know that for the state of Minnesota, when we get federal money, there is a portion of that which is for the purpose of paying for audits or covering that cost. Would that be true for any federal funds, even monies that come either directly, like Hennepin and Ramsey, or flow through the state, that if they are receiving federal money, a portion of that is to be used for the purpose of audits? And is that an allowable expense?
So we'd like to take a stab at that. Mr. Nauman, Mr. Bodden?
Madam Chair, I'm doing a little thinking here. I'm not sure if Ms. Jorgensen knows. I believe it would be an allowable use of the CRF money to conduct audits associated with the expenditure, but I want to be clear that I'm not entirely certain. Maybe Ms. Jorgensen has that information.
Ms. Jorgensen.
Madam Chair, Senator Kiffmeyer, so audits were definitely an allowable expense of the CRF. And so actually at the state level, we're using a portion of our CRF money to pay the state auditor's office who's conducting our CRF audit. The funding for at the local level, however, they had to conclude their spending by November 15th or December 1st. And so they had to find a different source of funding to pay for the audits at the local level. But we are following up with all of the local units of government who receive CRF, and almost every, down to the last one, has already contracted for an audit, either with the state auditor's office or with a CPA firm. So the local governments are getting audits of their CRF funding.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think the language was encumbered, spent, all those things. So could they pay get a bid and pay for the audit? That would be part of their final expenditure. So as it's a matter of that they expended it and that they could use that money, pay for that contract as part of their final expenditures. Would you clarify if that indeed is the case?
Ms. Jorgensen.
Madam Chair, Senator Kiffmeyer, the language when we worked with the local governments was that the money had to be spent and out the door by November 15th or December 1st. So they've already submitted all their final expenditures, and we're pretty much done with that portion of the program.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Well, Madam Chair, I think that means that if they spend it, meaning they have paid for those costs and they have paid for that, then that would be able to be included in their years of spending. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Gilmore. Okay, Senator Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before I get to my question, I just wanted to reflect on something that Senator Franzen was talking about. I proudly represent the city of Maplewood in Ramsey County and have followed this conversation, and I appreciate what Mr. Nauman said about the confusion that was involved in that initial discussion early on. Just as a matter of history, I think we should remember that when Congress first passed this bill, this was at the time of the first surge, which was really highly located in the larger cities around the country. And so I think that was a big part of the intent of why they allocated those funds initially, plus the regional considerations. And I know that, thinking back to the other cities in those counties, there were real concerns that the local needs would not be met because that would be swallowed up by the larger regional needs for those bigger counties and metro areas. So I just wanted to remind everybody about that part of the history. My question, another thing that I have heard repeatedly, I've never actually seen a piece of paper documenting it, and I don't know if Mr. Nauman or Ms. Jorgensen might know this information or some version of it off the top of their head, but when the funds were distributed to the states and there was guidance about how those should be allocated, there was discussion about how they should be allocated to local counties and cities. And my recollection is that Minnesota way surpassed that guidance, and that we, as one of, among all the states, we actually, our $841 million was a relatively large proportion of our total allocation compared to other states. And so if Mr. Nauman or Ms. Jorgensen has knowledge about that, I would be interested to hear any details you've got to share about that.
Well, Mr. Nauman, I have not heard that, Senator Camp, but Mr. Nauman, maybe you have, and Ms. Jorgensen afterwards.
Madam Chair and Senator Kent, what I can offer to you is that there was guidance from U.S. Treasury at the outset that states were encouraged but not required to share 45% of their CRF distributions. Treasury provided a couple of different ways of computing that 45%, and Minnesota in the end elected to use the more generous calculation of the 45% of the total allocation to the state. And when I emphasize total because that includes the Hennepin and Ramsey amount for the purposes of calculating the total. So if you include those amounts, then actually Minnesota is exceeding the 45% total allocation recommendation.
And Ms. Jorgensen, Madam Chair.
Senator Camp?
Madam Chair, I was just wondering if Ms. Jorgensen had
Ms.
any
Jorgensen,
other
do you have any
additional
further comments?
information?
I think Mr. Nauman really did it well, though.
Madam Chair, I agree.
Thank you. Senator Kent?
No, I was just going to say, and I'm going to keep looking to get back to this information because exactly what Mr. Nauman said, it seems like really every other state took the lower ends of those guidance, which made us relatively more generous to our counties and cities than other states were.
Because we have a top-notch fiscal analyst, was able to figure that out, I believe. That's how
I agree.
Is there any further questions? I have one for you too, quickly. Senator Marty, you do make it submissive. You, in the original Senate File 1089 on the first section, it says you must review all the expenditures of the funds to determine, and in your delete all A2 amendment, you said you may review. So you are giving the option. Can you just explain why?
Sure, Madam Chair. Initially, when we started looking at it, one thought was, let's start with anything over 750,000, which is the FEMA audit threshold, and start requiring any expenditures over that to be sought, where those local governments would seek this funding. And two thoughts, one of which was, in many cases, that may not make sense. The chances of it, there is risk involved in applying for it, plus all the expense and hassle of applying for it. And so thinking, well, maybe we shouldn't mandate it. And then on top, then at that point thinking, well, why not allow those under that to do so as well? It's going to be, I think in most cases where there are applications made, they may be for larger amounts. I don't know that. But if a local government has the capacity to do this and they feel, hey, we can get $100,000 here that we can use for other COVID expenses, great. So we made it voluntary, but encourage anyone of any size, if they can get some money back, they have to, again, figure out how much time it takes, because like for PPE, one of the counties, I think southwestern Minnesota counties, were saying how many hours it would take them just to go through. It's not like we just gather up all the receipts and do it. We have to go through the receipts and figure out which ones are FEMA eligible, because FEMA eligibility is much tighter than it is for the CARES funding. So we decided make it voluntary. It's going to be enough of a headache for those who want to do it. Some of the others just couldn't feasibly do it. So I think it was basically necessary. We made it an optional thing. And for the good of Minnesotans, we hope that there's some cases where we can get the additional money. And I think whether it's spent at the local level or at the state level on COVID expenses, I think it's a great idea. So I think it's a great idea. I don't know how much it's going to pan out.
Senator Marty, well, I think it is a good idea. Did you, in your working with this and working with the counties and cities, are they planning on being very active in this FEMA reimbursement, just as they were with the 841 million that went out? They were extremely supportive to the counties and cities, and were there to answer questions and be very engaged. And I guess my other question would be to Ms. Jorgensen too, is what does your education outreach look like to support these local entities on this reimbursement track that they're going to have to go down, or they can go down? So Senator Marty?
Sure. I'll say that I think there's a lot of interest, but there's a lot of hesitation because of the risk. And one point that some of the local governments made was that they could get the reimbursement now, split it with the state, use it on COVID-related things, and then 2-3 years later, FEMA comes back and audits them. And I think people described it as a small risk, but a risk that they could come back in 3 years from now, force the local government to repay something. So I don't think it's not like they see, hey, free money. I think they see, hey, we are right now heavily focused on trying to get out the new money, the big money out there to address these huge needs we have. And here's some extra money that can help us address more needs that we otherwise wouldn't have covered. Let's try and go for this if we can. But if you read the letters from the local governments, you'll see they're not chomping at the bit to go after this money. I think they're saying, if we can get this would be really great. But don't count on it. And I think Amy Jorgensen and MMB, they're in the same boat. They're kind of, hey, we're trying to maximize every penny we can for the state, but not everything is going to be eligible for it. And it's a very complex process apparently for applying.
Thank you. Ms. Jorgensen.
Madam Chair, so as far as the education piece goes, we would partner up with public safety, Homeland Security, Emergency Management to do education should this bill pass, just to walk the counties, the cities, and the towns through the process and let them know how that would work. So, and we've had really great partnerships with the local government associations where we can, maybe do 3 webinars and touch most of the local governments, so we can do it pretty effectively and efficiently.
Okay. Would that be with the area EMS then, or would that be with, you said DPS, but would EMS be involved in that?
Yeah. It's generally a subset of Homeland Security Emergency Management. So we work with Angie Wynn over at Public Safety, who's our FEMA expert.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any further questions? Yes, Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to be very clear. There's been a lot of discussion back and forth, and sometimes as clear as mud to me, but I just very, very clearly want to know that all the local units of government are going to be treated the same as Minneapolis and St. Paul when it comes to reimbursement from federal dollars or state dollars. Are they being treated the same
Senator
with
Marty.
this amendment?
Madam Chair, this amendment is dealing with 841 million that came through the state, that 45% allocation. This is us trying to say, whether it's state or local folks who benefit from it, let's try and get as much as we can. And we decide to try and split a 50-50 split to try and encourage local governments to do it. I don't know. I think it may play out for some, but I think there are going to be cases where there might be money available, but just the resources aren't available to get them.
Senator Ingebrigtsen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm not sure if I'm fine. If everybody else on the committee is okay with this, I just want to make sure that everybody's paying their fair share here. And excuse me, there's a lot of money coming. In fact, we don't even know what's coming from the feds now. And I guess the question to you, Madam Chair, is are we going to be dealing with this in a finance committee again once we find out how many dollars are coming, or where all these?
Senator Ingebrigtsen, we are laying this bill on the
Okay,
table. Yep.
thank you.
We're laying it on the table. Everything is a moving target right now, right? Now, Ms. Jorgensen, you know that for sure.
For sure.
So, Senator Marty, I don't know if you have any other further comments that you'd like to make. I want to thank you for
Madam
your
Chair,
for time
yeah,
working on this.
I think it's a good bill, a potential for more money for state and local governments. Let's not count on it, and let's hope it pans out.
Okay. Thank you very much, Senator Marty, for your work on this. With that, this bill will be, Senate File 1089 is laid on the table. And members, we don't have anything planned for next week. We have second deadlines, so everybody's, Senator Benson's thanking your head, saying thank you, and so all these chairs here. With that, members, we are adjourned.